One thing you'll notice a lot in college, especially if you hang out with a very competitive, studious group of people, is that it's very tempting for people to allow their grades to determine their self-worth. And this can be very stressful, especially in a time like college, because in a period with so many tests and exams and essays and so many other ways to be graded on, it seems like our self-esteem is always being challenged in a way, as opposed to just having one skill and knowing whether or not you're good at it. If our self-esteem is based on the grades we're getting, then it's really subjective to change, because whether you do bad on one test can really completely change how you feel about yourself. And especially if you're hard on yourself, this can really lead your emotions to just be changing constantly. So what I want to do in this video is propose a couple ways to de-link that connection between grades and self-worth, because I think it's not a very good connection to have. And the first thing I want to talk about is that you have to become a bit less outcome dependent if you want to de-link your grades from your self-worth, which is basically to say that we shouldn't consider it a win just if we're getting good grades on our tests. As opposed to this, we should put more emphasis on how much time we're actually spending studying and preparing for things like these, as opposed to focusing so much on the actual number grade. Because if we're actually setting the number grade as our goal, so say you want at least a 95 on your test, and say you still get something good, like maybe a 93, just because it didn't reach that specific number goal that you were looking for, you still might not count it as a win in your mind. And even if you did really well and better than the majority of the class, you still might consider it a loss in your opinion. But then arguably, if we judge the work we did based on how much time and effort we actually put into the assignment, then it's far less tempting to look at the number grade and think that you failed, even when you did decently. And this helps a bit with the constant fluctuations in self-worth that are basically just based off not doing quite as well as you wanted on a test. So especially if you just bomb a test, or maybe not bomb it, just don't do as well as you would have liked. If you're solely focused on the numbers you're getting on these tests, then it can be super tempting to just get super stressed and anxious and think less of yourself, because you're basing your self-worth so much on the numbers. While if you worked really hard on something and still didn't get the results you want, when you're not thinking solely about the numbers, you realize that it reflects a lot less about you, and it was most likely more of just a fluke as opposed to your actual competence or ability to conquer hard things. And I think this first tip is important because I've actually seen this so much in my own college experience. I have a lot of friends who are super stressed about their grades, and it seems like the ones who conflate their self-worth with their grades the most are actually the ones who are performing the best. So I have a bunch of friends who are actually getting A's, but even when they get an A, maybe just a low A, so like a 91 or a 92 on a test, they still feel like they failed the test, which is pretty silly because most people would see that and they think, wow, that's amazing, they did an amazing job. But if you're constantly trying to make the number an indication of your self-worth, so I want a high A, a 96, a 97, then even when you do well, it's very tempting to think that you're just not doing as well as you should be. So we need to become a little bit less outcome dependent and focus less on the grades and more about how much work you're actually putting in. Now my second tip to help you disconnect your self-worth from your grades is to basically become better in other areas of your life. One thing about self-esteem is that it's very connected to things we're good at. So if you're very good at studying, then that'll increase your self-esteem a bit because it's just something you're good at and you can feel confident about it. The thing with self-esteem is if we become good or if we become competent in several different areas, then if we slightly underperform in one of them occasionally, it's okay because we still have other things to bring us up when we're feeling down. So say I'm a pretty good student, but at the same time, I'm in shape, I'm good socially, and I'm good at an instrument, for example. If one day I don't do very well on a test, it's still okay because there are these other things to raise me up, even when I'm not feeling too great about that one particular thing. Well, if I make my entire existence just solely focused on my grades, if all I'm ever thinking about is studying, and I don't really attempt to have any sort of outside life from my studies, then when I just happen to not do well on a test, that's really the only thing that I derive confidence from. So it makes sense that my self-esteem would decrease so much more if I don't have these other things that are sort of helping me maintain it. So my one suggestion is find other areas in your life where you can derive self-esteem from. If all your self-esteem is just derived from your studies, it's going to be very, very stressful when you don't do well, regardless of what else is going on in your life. And like I said, these other self-esteem building activities, they can really be anything from going to the gym and getting in shape. I failed my test, but at least I'm jacked. You shouldn't say that, but it's like a silly example of how other areas of your life can kind of boost your morale even when you don't do well in one. Or, pick up some hobbies, so even if you don't do as well on a test, you have other things to think about and get you excited. But if studying is really the only thing going on in your life, and you have a fluke and you don't do well on a test or assignment, it's really going to lower your self-esteem so much more than it would if there were other things that were also raising it up. And my third and final tip is to stop romanticizing comparing your grades to your self-worth. I've actually seen a lot of videos around in sort of just the whole romanticizing academia space where people are constantly saying, oh, I'm only happy when I receive academic validation, almost as if this is a good thing or something that we should praise, with people showing their hundreds on their tests and saying, if I didn't get an A on this test, I would be depressed for the next week. People tend to romanticize it a lot, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it's important to just not consume content like this. If you're constantly looking at other people's achievements and other people who are saying that they're only happy when they're getting A's or overperforming, then it only makes sense that you're going to consume these ideas and think similarly. In the same way that if I'm trying to get into the dating scene, I'm not going to go on YouTube and look up a bunch of anti-women videos or something like that. If you want to feel good about yourself in a specific sense, it doesn't make sense that you go online and watch videos that would make you feel bad. So if you're having trouble with conflating your grades and self-worth, I would really recommend that, at least for a little bit, you sort of step away from those romanticizing studying videos and really just comparing yourself to other people academically in general. So now, just to review the 3 points I talked about in this video, if you want to deconflate your grades and your self-worth, then there's a couple things you can do. The first thing is to become less outcome dependent. Stop focusing so much on the number grade you're getting, because even if you do well, if you don't get the exact number you wanted, you might still feel like you're failing. So focus more on the amount of work you're actually putting in and use that as an indication of how well you're doing. My second point is to find other things in your life that you can derive your self-esteem from. So don't make studying your entire life, because if you don't do well on a specific test, you're going to feel really bad about yourself. But if you have other areas of your life to sort of bring you up at the same time, then it'll hit a lot less hard. And my third tip is to maybe just temporarily step away from the romanticized studying realm of YouTube, Instagram, or whatever, because it's an area that definitely glorifies the whole, oh, I'm always stressed out, I'm always just anxious about my grades sort of mentality, and I think this is super unhealthy at times. Now, I really hope you guys can get something out of this. If you like videos like this on productivity for college students, I really recommend you subscribe. But until then, I'll see you guys.